Hi, I'm Cher, the Shadow Walker, and today I thought we'd talk about shadows. What they are they demons? Are they entities? Or are they people, trapped souls? Well, I've had an experience with them, so I thought that I'd look into it and see how far back they go and if others have seen them. And I see we have one down here from Mary, and she said she had one in her apartment and she moved out. She talked to a paranormal investigator and they didn't have any answers. And she wants to know why she's seen three of them and she found they were freaky. So I looked back into history on shadows, and dating back to 3000 BCE, records show shadows, the kabut, is what the Egyptians called them. They believed the soul of a person had many parts, and one was the shadow soul. It was depicted as pitch black. Many people see them as pitch black. I don't think anybody's ever seen them as translucent, but definitely pitch black. Humanoid silhouettes considered a guardian of a person. So, a guardian of a person's soul or a guardian of a person that's living is what they believed that they were. They felt that they could also move independently if the spirit was balanced, if the balance of the spirit. So if a spirit was disturbed, then the shadow souls would appear. That's what the Egyptians believed. Now, ancient Greeks in the 8th century BCE, in their mythology, they referred to them as a Seka. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Lacking in physical form, but yet maintaining humanoid form, which is basically what I've seen. And I'm sure anybody else that's seen one has seen it that way too. Um, Islamic theology, pre 7th century, known as the jinn. Now, I've seen a lot of shows where people have used reference to the jinn in different ways, but the actual jinn was in the Islamic theology. And it's described as being created from a smokeless fire, for moving through walls or even the middle of a room. Now, when I had an experience with them, they moved along the wall, and I've actually seen one walk across a hallway. So, well, move across the hallway, I'll say walk. Um, in North America, they were known as Choctaw, which translates to the long black being that lurks in the forest and can slide across the ground like a shadow without a source. Now, I've had people tell me that they've seen them low to the ground and just moving, and that terrified them. I've also heard reports of people having them walk across or float across the road in front of them. I have had people see them in the middle of their living room and wonder why. I've even had people that have gone into hotels and seen them. So I've looked into different cases of that. So we could look at that. And I will give you my take on it after, but I thought we'd get more from other people at the same time. So in the 18th and 19th century, in the 1700s, in Europe, culture's shadow entities were called old hags. It's funny because they were also called that in Newfoundland. So, and the old hag often, they felt the presence of pressure on their chest while they were sleeping, like they were being suffocated. It kind of, sometimes they would call them night hags or crushers because you'd feel this heaviness on your chest. And that's been reported not just in Europe, but that was reported in Canada, in Newfoundland. There's actually reports of that. So that would disturb your sleep, and it would press down on your chest. Um, in 1887, Lahore, to some considered fictional, to others known as shadowy parasites, to others known as peakers. And this all comes into play when I explain to you, if you can remember that, what they are exactly. So, okay, so the difference between a ghost and a shadow person. I'm going to get into that. Now, I don't call them shadow persons, I call them entities. Okay, and there's a reason for that, and I will explain that to you just in a little bit. So, April 1997, the term was officially used by the paranormal researchers community by Heidi Hollis on a show called Coast to Coast. So she began to experience them from 1990 to 1995. And she actually wrote a book. And that was when she was in college that she was experiencing them. She categorized them as interdimensional beings rather than ghosts. I categorize them as entities. So, not quite the same thing. What we know, they have been seen for over 5,000 years. So, if you have seen them, you are not alone. And if you want to text me or email me, if you feel like coming up live and talking about your experience, that would be great. No judgment. I've considered them entities always, and I've seen many. In one of the houses that we had, it was an older house. It was turn of the century. It was in Ontario. I'd seen many things in that home, and it was a brick house. So this all correlates into the reasoning behind this. Now, energy comes, as I've said before, from stone. A lot of the rocks, like limestone, like copper that we have here in Canada, they give that energy that these entities need, and they will seek it out, and they can hold place, basically stay firm in those places because of that energy. So being a psychic, I have tried numerous different practices over the years, and some practices I shouldn't have tried, to be honest with you. And I believe that that brought them into my home. I don't want to discuss the type of practice that I did do, but I can tell you that I've never done it again, and I never will do it again. And so that's where I believe mine came from, because prior to that, I'd had ghosts in the house, numerous, but that wasn't anything that was unnerving. And I don't like the shadow entities. Those are the ones that are hardest to get rid of. It took me 2 weeks to purge them from the house. And it's a complicated daily cleansing. So, just a minute. Okay, so clearing them out of there. Now, I've cleared demons easier than I've cleared a shadow entity from a house. Reason being, a shadow entity requires a different form of energy. So if you've done negative things, which I did at that time with the practice that I had done, and that creates these issues. So I would suggest anybody who delves into things like Ouija boards or tarot. There's different types of practices that I did that I'm not going to mention, but they're higher up than that. And any of those, even Ouija and tarot, can create these issues. Generally, you're going to create something else, but there are times that they will come through. Now, and depending on the house itself and the souls that have lived in it, so the human beings that had lived there prior, any that had died on that land or in that home, those souls are going to be in that house if they are earthbound. And the shadows can, if they're not cleared properly, and they have to be cleared in the daytime, and they have to be cleared by a knowledgeable person. So I like a shaman or a faith healer with experience in that. Definitely not a priest. I'm sorry. I say that numerous times about even demons, and there's a reason for that. It doesn't work. It's I've looked into numerous cases on demons, and they've missed the boat on what they're doing. So with the shadows, they can, if you give them the wrong type of energy, actually multiply. So unlike a demon, which is one, and you're going to have to fight that demon that's there, where the power is within just that one, an entity, there can be numerous parts to. And those parts, like in the Egyptians, believed that it was different parts of the soul. Well, it's more like a parasite. And if you feed it, it will multiply. So therefore, you see more than one. And a lot of people, like, for instance, here, Mary in an apartment, you don't know who was in the apartment before. Was the apartment made of stone? Was the land, was it an issue with the land? So I'll always clear the land first to see. And then I'll clear the house. But with entities, you have to work for 2 weeks in the daytime to clear it in a very specific fashion. And no, that's one of the things that a person themselves cannot do. They need somebody to help them with. So basically, they can protect themselves in a home by getting any negative energies. So depending on who you've got in the house, you've got teenagers in the house, you have arguments in your home with your spouse, whatever it is, it's going to draw negative energy, and it has to be serious negative energy, is going to help them to feed. So that's always something to take into consideration when I walk into a home. If the people that are in the home are fighting, are angry, that's got to change. Because if that doesn't change, you can't change anything, because they are that strong. So I looked into numerous places around the world, as I've mentioned, and also in Canada. In Nova Scotia, they were known by the Mi'kmaq as Wiklamo, or the fairy people. In recent times, they've been spotted on the highways, tall shadows crossing the highways. Now, I've seen tall shadows crossing the highways. And so I'll always make a practice of cleaning my headlights before I drive, because sometimes shadows can bounce off your headlights if a insect hits them. So you've always got to look at the logical things to clear to know what actually is. But there have been actual cases of them crossing the roads. And in Cape Breton, in the Highlands, in the 1970s, the Hat Man, a tall shadow with a hat, often seen by the rugged coastlines, Um, some believed it was a captain of a ship that lost his life and was angry, and his soul is there. Everybody has the right to believe what they want. Um, my ancestral grandfather was Grand Chief Membitu, and Membitu told of shadowy phantom spirits. So he thought the same way that I did. I only looked this up on him yesterday, so I didn't know. I like to not know what he thought so that I have my own thoughts on things. And when this occurred in my life, I didn't even know that I was Métis at that time. So, um, Membitu said that they could walk through walls and they guarded the sacred sites. Well, there's a reason that they did hover or guard around the sacred sites. It's not so much as guarding, although you might see them with hellhounds. And definitely, if you've ever seen a hellhound, I don't see a lot of talk on that, and I will do something on that after. But um, generally, you're going to see them together, and there's a reason for them. They're both takers of souls in different forms. Okay. So a shadow walker takes the negative energies. Now, we can all be negative at times or angry or do something wrong. Well, I'm talking about a different level. I'm talking about evil, like people who red rum somebody or people who um, do horrible things to children or horrible things to women or other men. Those people, um, your murderers, those are the type of energies that shadow entities look for. They like those energies. Those energies give them power. And so a lot of times they'll be seen in different buildings where I'm going to talk about that now, where you're going to see that in why they're there, and in certain buildings why we can't get rid of them. Okay. So in Quebec, they were seen in the forests and often in the same area as a dogman. They can be seen with the dogman, but they're more than likely going to be seen with hellhounds. Some people confuse the two. There's a difference in size, there's a difference in how they stand. A hellhound is not bipedal. So that's the difference. So in Quebec, in the area, in the Gaspé area where my family originated from, they were seen. And they would see them become a solid image, so a shadow, or they would see them dissipate into nothing and flicker in and out like that. And that is possible depending on their energy level and where they are. The Mi'kmaq's oral history and the French have written history, and they believe they warned of danger. That's what they believed. New Brunswick, they are tied to the geological batteries. Now, the geological batteries I've spoke about in numerous shows before, are the rocks and the tectonic plate. There's a lot of things that people overlook when they're clearing something, and they should never overlook rocks. They should never overlook a house that's made out of brick, a house that holds marble in it, like your countertops in a kitchen, or fireplace, the stone. These are all energy drawers for any type of entity. So, especially in the New Brunswick area, I can see the correlation because they were seen as a black mass as opposed to a singular image. When I seen the largest one that I seen came across a wall and he walked out into the bedroom, and he was tall. I'm going to say looking kind of like a man, except a little bit more evil. And, but down in New Brunswick, where they seen them, they just seen them as a mass. And the reasoning behind that, in my opinion, is that there was a massive loss of life there. There was smallpox, there was typhoid. There was also when the British had put a bounty on the Mi'kmaq and they were scalping them. So there was a huge loss of life in that area. So as opposed to having the shadow be able to take a form kind of somewhat human, that massive energy, rather than disperse because of those rocks there, it just comes up as one big giant mass. That makes total sense because that's all that. It's not the Mi'kmaq that lost their lives that had that evilness in them. It's the human beings who slaughtered them, who scalped them, that created this issue. That type of bloodshed, that type of evil energy, that massive evil energy cannot be taken from the rocks. It can be quelled, if you will, by a shaman, um, a high shaman. I'm just going to put it that way. You have to really know what you're doing. Certain types of stones can help other stones release. But this type of massive loss will not be able to be released by anyone. It's just too great. And there was so much trauma felt in that area. And those entities feed off that trauma, that evil, that those people, how anybody could do that to another person, I have no idea. But obviously there were some. Upper Valley Hospital in New Brunswick, the staff and the patients in the ER reported seeing a tall figure with a hat like the one in Cape Breton that just they see in the hospital walking the halls. Bell Island, the Waba Iron Mine. Again, we're talking about minerals, we're talking about rocks. These areas are where you're going to find a lot of issues. So in the Bell Island, in the mines, through the mine shafts, the miners would see them. And they would also hear a hissing sound with them. Now, these type of entities are more of one level up from a shadow person. They're a shadow entity person, if you will. They're not really a person. They're more of a shadow entity that has the ability to protect. And it was protecting the minerals and the rocks because that's where they get their energy from. And the miners were pulling this out. So naturally, there's going to be a clash between the two. In Western Canada, in Edmonton, in 1914, a palliative care center was a hot spot for shadow. They called them shadow people there. They were seen by the nurses, the doctors, and other staffs prior to a patient passing. Now, with my psychic abilities, when I visit a hospital, I see ghosts. I see all that stuff. The funny thing is, like, I will see people as they died. So if you died in a car accident with massive injuries, I'm going to see you with the massive injuries. I don't want to get graphic, but that's how you're going to come back. Okay. You're not in pain, but you're coming back with those graphic injuries. I see that. And the funny thing, when children that pass on in a hospital, when I see them, they're usually peeking around a corner or they're running from room to room. And that's a lot of children that died of chronic illness in the hospital. They They didn't pass over because a lot of times, not to say that their family wasn't with them, because generally their families are there with them. I've visited the cancer ward in Toronto, so I know, in Sick Children's Hospital. Lots of families in there together with their children fighting cancer, some of them losing their battle. And those children that are lost, they consider the staff and the doctors, the caretakers that clean their rooms, but generally the nurses, they consider them family because they cared for them in a way that their parents would when their parents were taking a break, when their parents were gone to get some food, whatever they were doing. So those children have considered two families then, their biological family and their host family, which is the hospital, the nurses. Um, those So they're drawn to stay with somebody they were close to. Now, generally, those type of ghosts, I can pass right over. That's not a problem. If they want to go on, they're going to go on. And those children, when they pass like that in the hospital, to anybody who's lost a child in the hospital, if their spirit decides to stay there and I go in, I always tell them to go to the light. And they generally do. They'll go to it. They understand that they've passed on, but they're comfortable there. Some of those kids have lived in a hospital for years and they are comfortable there. That's their home. They've not known running around outside because of illness. So, but the shadows that come, they don't come for the children. They can cause us to be sick, Mary, very sick, depending on the type of entity. Some of those shadow entities are just downright evil in a different way than a demon. A demon holds a different power, but a shadow entity, because it can multiply, is one of the most difficult things to get rid of and one of the most dangerous things to have in a home. So in the hospitals, a lot of times as we age, we get older, and I find this generally, like, I don't know about other parts of the world, but in Canada, if you're old and you're not able to care for yourself, if you go into a nursing home and you don't have enough money, they're going to turn to your children and they're going to say they have to pay. And a lot of the kids, I'm going to say, that are in their 30s and their 40s that are in Canada have been, and not all of them, but a lot of them will walk away from their parents at a certain age because they don't want to be left holding the financial bag for their parents. That's how it is. And so those people are in the hospital and their families, for whatever reasons, don't come and visit them. And they are left there to die on their own. The only family that they know are the nurses and the doctors that care for them. And those people can be really angry. Also, you get people from prisons, you get people that have red rummed somebody that you don't know they've done it, or they've done something to a child, and they could be in the hospital sick. And if they pass, those evils that they held within their souls are the energies that the shadows look for. So you're going to see them. You're going to see them in the hospital. The staff sees them. They're going to take that energy from that soul. Are they taking the whole soul? It depends on the level of energy. So if you've murdered somebody, if you've red rummed somebody, if you've done horrible things to children or to men or women or to animals, absolutely, they will come and they will take your soul. You have not set yourself right before you got to that point. So that can occur. And it does. And when they're in a hospital, because a lot of hospitals are built with cement and, the materials, you have to look at the materials that are used. Those materials hold. They hold those energies. And when we're talking about a hospital, we're talking about floor after floor after floor in the hospital. And so there's many people that pass in a hospital. Um, and there's only a small group of them that are evil. But say you can't get them out of there because of the cement, because of the rock, and because of the fact that there's more than one of them in there that died that way. So you've got a lot of energy, and they have a lot of power right there. So they take that energy that's in there that you've got, and they use it, and they multiply. So you're going to see them on different floors. I've seen them on different floors. Um, in hospitals all over. When I walk into a hospital, a lot of times when there is a spirit wandering the halls, I will step into the washroom. Usually, if you're lucky enough to have one of those private um, washrooms in a hospital, I'll go into there and I will tell them that they need to go to the light in the area that I see them, because I don't want to stand right out in the middle of the floor in the hallway and say that. People look at you a little strange. So, but an entity in a hospital like that, I can't get rid of, and no one can. So, and they are there. Even if you tear the building down, they're still going to be held in the rock. So, if you look at a mushroom and its sporous underground is how it multiplies, that energy goes down under into the rocks and is sporous. So there is the complication to clearing a large building, a hospital, a psychiatric hospital, especially. And we'll get into those. That's the type of people. So let's pull my notes up here. So in BC, in 1907 and to 1983, in the Tranquil Sanitarium Psychiatric Hospital, construction workers in the 1960s reported seeing a black shadow swinging from the ceiling back and forth. Again, you're in a hospital, and you're for people with mental illness, some of them quite serious. And a lot of that is the energy. And those buildings are built of stone, and those tunnels that are underneath, well, you're down underneath. So that whole thing that I'm talking about, the mushroom effect or the spores, that's where it is. So it is taking hold down there, and it is not letting go. So you're going to see it on any floor in that hospital. And they did. They would even see them up in the tower, in the West Tower in the hospital. Now, they had several paranormal investigators that have reported seeing them in the tunnels. So they have investigated it. And I haven't heard of any psychics attempting to clear it. And I'll tell you, they can't. So a good psychic knows they can't clear that. We can clear the ghosts, the spirits, or the demons that are in there, but we're not going to be able to clear the entities. That's just as simple as it is. Those people, when they died in those sanitariums, a lot of times they were heavily drugged. They put some of the criminally insane in there. So people that had done some horrible things to other people, they're in there, and they're heavily medicated. And when they pass on, that's exactly what a shadow entity is looking for to feed from. So they are there, they are powerful, and they are strong. Now, that's not to be confused with a person with mental illness that passes away. When a person in your family who has a mental illness passes on, and you've been trying to help them, and they're your family, right? Like, you could have somebody that has schizophrenia, or you could have somebody that has bipolar, and they're still part of your family, and you still love them, and they still come around. They're not evil people. They just have an issue in their brain that creates this. Now, when they give them drugs and they heavily medicate them, when they come back as a spirit, and they come back as a spirit, and people have come to me for a reading, and they'll sit across the table from me, and let's just say the spirit was their sister and her name was Peggy. She will come through and she will be spinning, and she will be trying to give me a message to give to them. But instead of just standing in one spot, she's going all over the room, and she's turning and she's turning. And I have to take extra time to look at her and to understand that she is trying to tell them something. And it's generally that she misses them, or that she loves them, or thank you. So that's the difference between an evil entity and a person that's criminally insane that passes over, and their evil that they have in them, as opposed to just a regular person that has bipolar. They're going to come through spinny as a spirit, but not evil. So let's not confuse the two. Totally different. And I can understand that the hardcore medications that a lot of people have to take to keep their system in balance, when they come back, they will be spinning. And that's a healthy, normal spirit. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. But when I see a shadow entity in a hospital, you can't clear it and you can't communicate with it. It wants to possess or suffocate you, basically. So that's where you get that old hag thing from, where they're pressing on you, because they're a very powerful entity. In British Columbia, in Fernie, the Ghost Rider. I thought this was fascinating. So, a massive shadow seen on the face of Mount, and it's Hosmere. I hope I pronounced that right. Some believe the town to be cursed from the 1800s to this day. Now, not so much when people say, well, the whole town is cursed. It's not the town that's cursed. It's the land, it's the rocks that it's on. So depending on what happened there could be a misconception into what can be cleared and what can't be. Like, is it something that a shaman can come and clear the land? Is it something that a psychic can go in and clear the building? Are they seeing shadows in the buildings? I have not read a report on that. I've just heard them say that they feel that that whole town is cursed. So I'm going to look into see if I can find any other reports on it. But so far, I haven't been able to. And so, and then I wanted to see, because I hadn't seen a lot of Newfoundland, but this was very interesting. So in Newfoundland, Island of the Shadows, known to have some of the most fact-based shadows. The Bell Island in 1895, right, to present, they still see that over the miners. And I've explained that to you about the mines and how the rocks hold power. They don't really want you taking the rocks. They don't want you taking their minerals out of there. They need that. That's their energy. You're breaking it up. That's not them multiplying. That's you taking their energies and dispersing it into little pieces. So then you're generally going to see more of a massive heavy, hissy presence around, because that's one level up of them. And that level up is the level that can really do a lot of damage. It can make people sick. It could make you have unhealthy thoughts, would be the best way to put it. And that mass of life is consecrated into the ground, into the soil, and into the rock. And you're talking about a lot of rock down there, a lot of minerals in Canada. So I'm not surprised that they see so many all over the place. Um, and it's all that trauma that people. So I know that there's a lot of miners down there, that'll tell you a lot of miners lost their lives in the mines, in cave-ins. Um, my dad worked in the mines. My uncle worked in the mines, and numerous of my cousins worked in the mines up in the Elliott Lake ones, and in the east as well. And there were cave-ins at times, and so you lost your friends down there, and that trauma based, so that horrible trauma of being cut off, losing your oxygen, and dying slowly. Absolutely. That trauma is not that of an evil person, but it's trauma, and they will feed on that as well. So it's a heavy presence of that. That's why they're going to be seen more in an ER, okay, or in certain rooms. You're going to look at, for a nurse, if you're seeing them in a hospital, take a step back and look at the history of the person that's in that room, um, people that have been in that room that you've known that have passed on. And that's where you're going to find where they're getting their energy from. You can't do anything about it, but it is there. So that's where you get. And so down in the 1700s in Newfoundland, they called her, the early settlers called her the old hag. And that was the one that weighed heavy on your chest. So see that not just over in Europe did they call it the old hag. They actually called it in Newfoundland the old hag, that heavy presence on your chest. And people that have camped on the land there, or sailors, will see them. And when people lose their life at sea, that's trauma, that's fear, and that definitely creates an issue. So they feed off that. So you're going to, one that's there then becomes many. Campers, you're camping on land, and there's rock under there everywhere, right? And so that rock is holding that energy. And some of the strongest rock that I find is either in the East Coast, Ontario, way up in the Manitoba, way up in Manitoba. So towards Churchill, like any place where you're going to find heavy sediments of certain types of rock. And Northern Ontario, copper mines, numerous places like that. And like Canadian Shield, if you've ever driven through like Ontario, you go through the Muskokas and you go around, you're going to see how they've blasted through, and you're driving through these huge rocks. Well, those huge rocks are they're holding a lot of energy, and they hold a lot of the negative energies of the people that have passed on there. Ontario, the Great Lakes hold great power because they've got the limestone. So that's actually a frequency bridge. So where you're going to see those areas in the Great Lakes, you're going to see more Bigfoot, you're going to see more Dogman, and you're going to see hellhounds, and you're going to see shadow entities and demons. But demons more in a home, not so much on the land, unless that demon was on that land originally. Okay. So, like, you're talking centuries ago, what happened there, who lived there, and again, what they lived in. And if they were an evil person, you've got that. Um, so, the Fairmount Royal um, York in Toronto, which is a beautiful hotel, I've actually stayed there. In 1929, on the eighth floor, the guests were seeing shadows. And this has been consistently reported of these dark humanoid silhouettes that lack features but move with purpose. So they have a great deal of energy. Sometimes they'll see them walking through, but in the Fairmount, they've got like beautiful archways that are made of marble. Okay. So naturally they're going to hold there. So those type of buildings, you're not going to get them out of. You're just not, because of the rock. And Fort Henry in Kingston, which I've been there and I felt the death, the loss of life there, and the anger and the fear and the evil. You're going to get a whole mixture there. It's a whole ball of wax there of all different types of energies. They're going to take the energies that they want, feed off of them, and the other ones they can't touch. So they have reported seeing them in the corridors there in Fort Henry, and they consider them peekers, like they're peeking around a corner or something. Sure, they're going to see that. That's normal. Any psychic who's been there in that area knows what I'm talking about and has felt the presence of the loss of life and those that took their lives and lost their lives there. The in the Great Lakes, the indigenous people, the Anishinaabe and the Ojibwe in Lake Superior, they would see one underwater, and it was the underwater agua. And in the pictographs depict the entity, and they considered it an underwater panther, would be basically what you translate it to in English. That's a large area of deposit of copper. So that holds huge energy for them. Copper's in batteries, right? So you know that that's going to hold energy, and that negative energy feeds off of it. So those entities love those areas. So they're connected to the rocks, like the limestone and the copper, marble, and other sources of rocks. That's the heart of their power. And that's a very powerful. In North Bay and in Cobalt in Eastern Ontario, the Bunker Military Museum. This is a historic mining town. So there's been a lot of lives lost there. You're talking about miners, right? And they see shadow entities frequently. And they're actually included on the walking tour as factual, because you will see them. You're going to see them day or night. These aren't things that just go bump in the night. These are things that are there in the daytime. You can see them coming across the road in the daytime, and you'll wonder, well, like, how could I see a shadow in the daytime? Well, somebody lost their life there in a horrific fashion at the hands of somebody that was very evil. And that evil presence is still there. And that's where it's coming from. The rocks are the conductors, and they need negative energies to multiply. So I've always said, when you go to clear a house, you have to go in with a clear mind, and you clear the land first. Never look at the house first. I always laugh when I know the paranormal investigators are going in they're not clearing it. They're trying to get evidence of it. It would be interesting if some paranormal investigators, if they came upon a house that was like this, as instead of going in the house to investigate first, never stepping foot in it, but filming outside with their cameras night and day to see if they can see anything there. That would be interesting. And they should really start there as opposed to starting inside. Um, there's so much power in areas like where people lose their lives and massive loss of life in an area. Those ones you cannot clear because of that evil. So, to a lot of people that are having an issue, if you're having an issue with a spirit in your house, you're seeing ghosts, you're seeing spirits, whichever you want to call them. Um, you feel there's a demonic presence in your house, that can be cleared. Sometimes the house, primarily the land, needs to be, I say, attacked first and cleared. And you have to have the proper person. And I always go back to, and I only found out 6, almost 7 years ago that I was Métis, but I would always go back to the original people of the land because those are the people that held the most power. Those are the people that can clear things. And those are the people with the most knowledge on how to clear. For the most part, it's been handed down through their oral history. So those are the people that you want to get the help from. For me, if I was to clear an area like a house that had a great deal of issue with it, and I had cleared the land, not that I can't do it myself, but I like having a shaman as well. It's helpful to have somebody like that. Oh yes, the right there in Kingston Penitentiary. I've been to Kingston Penitentiary to visit somebody, and so for nearly 200 years of the violence in there and the violent people in a prison, and the fact that prisons aren't made out of cardboard, they're made out of generally cement and stone. Um, they can't get rid of those, and they've reported seeing shadow figures and disembodied voices they'll hear, and they'll hear the sound of jangling chains. All of that is in those areas. So if you've ever visited somebody in prison, and I was at Kingston Pen and visited somebody that was in there when I was a child, and so yeah, it's there, and there's even when they take down a building like that, you can't rid it, the ground of it, because there was, if you look at putting a group of evil people together, I mean, not petty theft, but we're talking people who have committed the most heinous crimes were in there. And that evil energy is just passed on in there, passes on to the entities. The entities collect it. The hellhounds come for some, but the entities generally collect the most. So depending on the type of human being you were, if you were in a prison, or you are in a prison, um, if you've committed heinous crimes and you're sitting there having your 3 meals a day, good on you, because the entities will come for you. When you pass on, you aren't going to a pleasant place. You may think that when you're sitting in a building like that, people have lost their lives and you're getting away with something, but by sitting there and being fed and you're warm, but that's not how it works. Payback comes. It really does. And the unfortunate thing is you can't get rid of those entities once they capture that evil energy from the soul. Most souls will pass on into a different energy plane, and it's a bright, healthy energy plane is the best way to describe it to you. But the evil souls, the ones that have been in a prison, when they pass on and they've committed those heinous crimes, the soul is generally, the best way to put it is, it is drained of all that evil energy and just left. That's not important anymore, but that energy is taken by that entity or by the hellhounds, depending on the level of what they've done. Different levels, different punishments. Prison isn't the punishment. The punishment's going to come after. So these entities, they'll have great power. They can make you sick if you have them in your house, and they are so if you walk into an older turn of the century home, a lot of people I love architecture, so I love to walk into old homes, the staircases and everything, and I'm sure I'm going to see ghosts. And then you're seeing shadow people in those homes, or shadow entities in those homes, whichever you want to call them. They're going to be very hard to get rid of unless you worked on it for 2 weeks, and that's a long time, and you have to do it in the daytime. And you're lucky if the building has no brick on it, or if it doesn't have. I had brick and I had a cement driveway. So, and I was built right near the Great Lakes. So when you have all those things working against you, it's very hard to get rid of something. You have to have lots of positivity, and you have to use different types of rocks. I use many different types of rocks. And it's funny because a lot of psychics were known for looking into a crystal ball. I wear a crystal ring here. I don't know if you can, there, now you can see it. I wear a crystal ring. And the reason I wear that is because when I'm speaking of this, it's a protector. It's a barrier. So in ancient times, when you went for a reading, because if the person that you were actually sitting across the table from was an actual psychic and knew what they were doing, that crystal that they had in the center of the table was their protector, kind of cloaked them from having any of that negative come around them. You don't know when somebody walks in and they sit down, are they going to be a good person or a bad person? Or I'm looking right into them, so I see everything. And sometimes you see some things that are pretty unpleasant in certain people. So it's always good when you're doing that to have crystal. I've noticed and I've looked at a lot of people that are doing remote viewings, and I've seen them on YouTube, and they're not going about it in the right way. I'm sorry, but they don't have the skill level for what they're doing, and they haven't protected themselves properly. So all those things are going to cause them to get sick. So they'll all of a sudden get a doozy of a flu and wonder, well, geez, why did I get a flu? Well, you were looking into somebody that you're looking for people that have been red rummed by a particular person. And you're trying to read that person that you think has done this horrific, heinous crime. You're pulling that energy into your area, and you're not protecting yourself. And unless you understand and know and have the knowledge to protect yourself from all of that, you're going to get sick. And you are going to get sick in different ways. You can have things as simple as a flu or a migraine, or you could get a severe illness. Those type of things can attach to you so that you can even die in an accident. So if you notice that you're watching somebody that's doing that type of stuff, I would take a step back from that and understand that it's not the way it should be done. It's not healthy to watch that. It's not healthy for the person watching it, but it's also very unhealthy for the person that's doing it, that they haven't covenanted themselves first, protected themselves, cloaked themselves so that they can't be attacked. Demons are going to attack certain types of people. Spirits, depending on the type of spirit or ghost you've got in your house, could be an angry one. They can be a little persistent and difficult to remove at times, but they can be removed. A demon can be cleared if you clear the land first. An entity in a home is something that can be cleared, but it's a daytime thing. If it's in an apartment building, you're not going to clear it. It might not even have come from that particular apartment or the people that live there 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4 before you. It is going to come because the building has a lot of cement in it, has a lot of stone in it, and has a lot of negative energy in it, because you're talking about just like a hospital where there's a huge group of people, and like a mine where there's a lot of trauma. In an apartment building, whatever happened to a neighbor that lived there, say 20 years ago, you can't tell. And that is there. So you will see these shadows. And yeah, I'm like Mary did. She moved. I'd move. I would, because it would be too difficult, because they can move through the walls. They can cross the hallways. They're going to go up and down floors. So it's going to be very hard to get rid of them, as opposed to just one building where you're going to work on clearing that house. That's like, it's just like a house is basically a small room. An apartment is multiple rooms in a big building, and you can't control how the people are 3 floors up or 10 floors up or 20 floors up. You can't control the anger. You can't control the evil. Yeah, I mean, there was one down in Toronto, there in McCarthy, that was a serial killer, and that's a building that I would not live in, because you're definitely going to have a lot of evil in that building that was held there, that evil energy. So you're going to see those shadow entities. And I would be interested in seeing if the people in those buildings get sick a lot, because I would guess that they would, because they were in that area where that occurred, and those entities will make you sick. So, as much as back in history, in some different depictions of shadow people or shadow entities, they thought they warned them away from danger. It's not so much that they warned them, but they stood in an area, and generally the Mi'kmaq knew enough not to cross that boundary, because they didn't want to get sick from that area. So by seeing that, instead of the area warning them, the intelligence of the Mi'kmaq people knew not to cross that area and get sick. That's as simple as that is. So there are many different types of reasons that we have shadows. So we're just going to go over them. So, was there evil in that house? Were you playing with a Ouija board? Were you doing a remote viewing and you didn't have the skill level for that? Some people are, I guess they come up with a lot of words like intuitive or sensitive. I have a gift. A lot of people have a different level of a gift, but that doesn't mean that you should cross that boundary into that higher level to try to see if you can see something, because you're going to get sick. Because if you're dealing with evil people that have done evil things and you're trying to remotely read them, that evil energy is going to be there and it's going to make you sick. I've seen several people now that have done that have gotten ill. Um, I've known a few psychics that have passed away that got ill after trying to deal with things. And I noticed that they didn't have any crystals. And I noticed that they didn't have certain types of rocks that they should have. Um, Diamonds, different rocks, alexandrites, different stones, jade. There's a lot of power in a lot of different stones. I have a lot of different stones and I use those stones. I don't wave them around or chuck them on the table in a little bag or anything, but I'll have it on me, and that's my protector. It's a lot of people think if they wear a cross on their neck, it's going to protect them, but it's not going to do much for you. You need to have a stone. And the reason being, a lot of crosses aren't made out of gold. So it's not so much as the shape of the image that you're wearing, it's it's the mineral, the stone. If you're wearing gold, great, but it has to be pure gold. Okay, it can't be half gold. Okay, so it can't be gold dipped. You have to have pure gold. You have to have copper. You have to have, so it's kind of easy to have these things, and if you bring copper, say, into a house where there's shadow entities, you're actually, when you're walking out of there, if you take that piece of copper with you, you're actually having those shadow entities with you. If you've cleared it for 2 weeks and you've got them in that piece of copper, and you don't want that. So for those type of situations, different stones, um, different rocks, right? And you don't want to put the rock. I You don't want to put the wrong rock there with you. You don't want to have the wrong rock there with you. I've known of people that have gone in with copper, like I said, and carried it home, and then they were sick, and they get one illness after another. It's because they went in to clear something and they brought it out in that energy form because it was drawn to that energy form. I had a discussion with a friend of mine a few years ago, and they asked me, well, what if you get it and then you put it in a box and you take that box, you're still taking that someplace. You're not ridding anything. You are taking it, you're transporting it, and you're putting it someplace else. And you're complicating it. If you think that you can go off and bury it into a field, a farmer's field someplace, they build a subdivision there and there's all kinds of issues there afterwards. And people are trying to figure out, well, it's the land, but it's what somebody put on the land. They put that negative energy there. So, I mean, you really have to know that that's there and somebody's put it there. And it will come up through the ground and it will haunt those homes. It's the best way to put it, because whether it's a spirit or a demon or a ghost or a shadow, it's haunting that home. It's in that home. It's embedded in that home. So we can get rid of a lot of them, but we can't get rid of that. I would move. If you don't have the ability to rid the home and the ground of it, I would move. It would make it better for your health. So you have to look at the health of the people in the house too. Are they having emotional issues because they're not sleeping right? They're not eating right. They're sick, somebody's sick and they're tired because they're caring for somebody that's sick in the house all the time because of this. Are they having financial issues from it? Because they're an entity basically is going to attack everything in your life. So, but a shadow entity is not going to follow you from place to place. If you go to another place and there's another shadow entity there, that's not the same one that you had before. That's just a different one. So keep that in mind. How can you get around that? Well, if you're walking outside of a building and you walk into it and you start to feel a heavy presence, you start to feel the old hag, you don't want that apartment. You don't want to live in that building. So everybody can be attuned to that. You can center yourself, be calm, and walk into the building, look at the building. And if you feel those negative energies, it's not for you. Even if it's a house and it's for the cheapest price and you're thinking this is a steal, but it also may be the death of you. So you have to consider that. And it's funny because certain types of demonic energies and entities can draw you towards those type of homes. They can draw you towards to live there because they want to feed off you, because they feel things off of you. You could be a very angry person at the time. You could have been going through a lot, or you could have attached to you another person that is doing horrible things that you have no idea that you're living with. And that is going to affect your well being. So, if you've experienced any of these things, I hope I've explained it in a way that everybody can understand. I try to just take it and dumb it down. I don't want to have spookiness to things, okay? I'm not looking at this like some of the ones that you've seen that are passed on that were demonologists and psychics that worked together and they were, oh, this is terrifying, or there's things shooting across the room. And sometimes there can be that. There can be those type of energies, but we don't have to make it spooky. We can dumb it down, look at it, and be sensible about it and clear it. And I want people to realize that they don't have to be embarrassed about talking about what they see. And you're not crazy, right? The nurses aren't crazy, and the doctors in the hospital, when they see them, they see them. People are not crazy when they see these things. They see them because they are there. Speaking about it, talking to somebody that's knowledgeable about it is quite helpful. And look to the original people of that area first and foremost. Those are the people that are going to be able to give you the most help. A knowledgeable psychic, a knowledgeable gifted person like myself can help you depending on what you're living in. So if it's an apartment building, I'm going to tell you it's going to be very hard to get rid of. Rather than pay for somebody to come in and clear that, you need to get yourself out of there. So the things that you can do is when you walk into a place before you're buying it, if it's a low price, or you're looking at living there and renting it and nobody else has rented it and you wondered why it keeps turning over. These are all things. Ask how long did the last tenant live there? And always keep the old hag in your mind, because the old hag, that heavy presence that you're going to feel, is number one key to say, nope, not living here. I'm not going through this because I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be ill. So, I mean, demons can make you sick. Entities can make you sick. Those are the two that are going to make you ill. The ghosts are going to scare some people, not so much. So just take it to heart when you walk into a home, even if it's a new home and you're walking into a subdivision, you're looking at the land. Take a walk around the area if you can, as opposed to going into the show house and being wowed by the shiny taps or something. Walk around the area. Are you feeling anything? Do you feel heavy? Center yourself first. Don't go in there all giddy and excited because, ooh, we're buying a home. Relax yourself. Feel the ground. Ground yourself. Feel your feet underneath you. Allow your body to feel what's there. And when you walk into the building, allow your body to feel what's there. And when they say you can have lot 24, or you can have lot 7, you want to walk to lot 7 and you want to stand on that ground and you want to walk around it. Close your eyes, be quiet, relax. If you're feeling that old hag presence or that heaviness, that's not an area to live. Save yourself a ton of headaches and just say, I'll look someplace else. So I hope I've explained things to you today, and I thank you for stopping by, and I look forward to seeing you again. And I'm Cher the Shadow Walker, and I plan on doing a video on hellhounds in the near future. And so I'd like to thank everybody and have a wonderful day.